Behind every smile in the service industry lies a story untold. Today, you will witness the morning routine of a waitress whose quiet strength hides connection that could change everything in an instant. Emily Carter maneuvered through the narrow aisles of the Carter family diner with the practiced ease of someone who had spent years perfecting the art of service. Balancing 2 steaming plates in one hand and a coffee pot in the other, she offered a warm good morning to a regular sitting by the window. The cozy establishment buzz of the morning crowd, clinking cutlery, sizzling bacon, and the low hum of conversations created a familiar rhythm that pulsed to the diner every weekday. The Carter family diner was a staple in the neighborhood, a place where truckers, office workers, and families all mingled over hearty breakfasts. Its checkered floors and chrome accents spoke of decades of history, and every photo on the wall told a story of community. Emily took pride in this place, not just because it was her workplace, but because it was her family's legacy. Her father, Mr. Carter, ran the kitchen with the precision of a seasoned chef, leaving her to be the face customers saw, the one juggling orders, smiles, and the occasional complaint. Despite her confident exterior, Emily carried the weight of expectation on her shoulders. She'd grown up in this diner, watching her father build it from a small eatery into a local favorite. Now, as the morning rush surged around her, she felt the constant pressure to keep everything running smoothly. Each table had its own rhythm. The elderly couple who always shared a blueberry pancake, the group of construction workers who needed their meals fast, the mother with 2 restless toddlers. Emily moved among them like a conductor orchestrating a symphony, ensuring no one left dissatisfied. Her morning had begun before dawn, setting up tables, brewing coffee, and checking stock. Now, hours later, fatigue tugged at her muscles, but she didn't let it show. Customers often underestimated the effort behind her effortless smile, unaware of the stress that came with being the bridge between the bustling kitchen and the ever-demanding front of house. She refilled a cup of coffee for Mrs. Langley, a longtime patron, who complimented her on always remembering the perfect amount of cream. Emily returned the smile genuinely. Small gestures like that made the exhaustion worth it. From the open kitchen, the clatter of pans and the occasional barked instruction from Mr. Carter echoed. Her father had built his reputation on discipline and quality, and though he rarely left the kitchen during rush hours, his presence was felt everywhere. Emily occasionally caught glimpses of him through the service window, a reassuring constant amidst the chaos. She admired his dedication, even as she bore the brunt of customer interactions alone. The rush had its predictable patterns, yet no 2 mornings were the same. A mix-up in order could spiral into delays from multiple tables, and Emily had to think on her feet, smoothing over minor mishaps with quick apologies and complimentary muffins. Years of experience had taught her to keep her tone light and her demeanor unflappable, even when frustration simmered beneath the surface. There were fleeting moments of respite, the brief satisfaction of clearing a table just as a new party walked in, or exchanging a tired smile with a co-worker who understood the strain. These moments kept her going, along with the knowledge that her work directly contributed to the diner's success. Every satisfied customer was another thread strengthening the Carter family legacy. As she passed by the front door, she glanced outside at the sun climbing higher in the sky, casting warm light through the large glass windows. Another wave of customers was lining up, ready to fill the already buzzing diner. Emily tightened her ponytail and took a deep breath, readying herself for the next round. What most of the patrons didn't know, and what Emily rarely thought about during the chaos, was that her ties to this diner went beyond employment. She wasn't just a waitress. She was the daughter of the man who owned it, the very heart of the establishment. That fact, unknown to most, would soon turn an ordinary morning into a moment that no one in the diner would ever forget. Emily barely had time to register the passing hours, as the breakfast rush carried on like a relentless tide. Each table demanded her attention in different ways, and the rhythm of serving felt both mechanical and deeply personal. Her mind kept a running list. Table 6 needed a refill on coffee, the family near the door wanted extra syrup, and a man by the counter was waiting for his check. Every move had to be quick, efficient, and above all, friendly. This was the unspoken burden of the service industry. To appear calm and cheerful no matter what chaos unfolded behind the scenes. Emily had long ago perfected the mask, the ready smile, the polite nod, and the tone of voice that could soothe even the most irritable customer. Yet beneath it all, there were moments when she felt like she was performing a never-ending balancing act, one mistake away from everything toppling over. Her father had once told her, "People come here hungry for more than food. They come for warmth, for familiarity. That's what makes us different." Emily took those words to heart. Even on days when exhaustion tugged at her limbs, she reminded herself that every plate she served carried the Carter family diner's reputation with it. She wanted people to feel at home here, the way she had felt since she was a child sneaking behind the counter to watch her father cook. The challenges weren't just physical. There was an emotional toll to absorbing other people's frustrations, especially on mornings when tempers ran high. A man might snap because his eggs were overcooked, or a mother might complain that her children's pancakes were taking too long. Emily had learned not to take these moments personally. She saw them for what they were, the projection of someone else's stress, and did her best to ease the tension with patience and quick solutions. And yet, there were bright spots that made the grind worthwhile. Mrs. Langley, the elderly woman by the window, always thanked her with sincerity that warmed Emily's heart. A group of construction workers left her a generous tip with a note that simply said, "Thanks for the great service." These small acts of appreciation reminded her why she loved this work despite the hardships. Emily's bond with the diner ran deeper than a paycheck. This was a place where she had grown up, learning the value of hard work from a father who had built everything with his own two hands. She remembered late nights spent doing homework in the corner booth, her father checking in between flipping pancakes and stirring soups. Over the years, she had watched him weather economic downturns and staff shortages with quiet resilience, always putting the customers first. Now, as an adult, she felt the same sense of pride in maintaining that legacy. Every satisfied customer was a silent testament to her family's perseverance. Even when her father's stern voice barked orders from the kitchen, she knew it came from a place of love and shared purpose. Midway through the rush, Emily caught her reflection in the stainless steel of the coffee machine. Her ponytail had loosened and a thin sheen of sweat clung to her brow, but her smile remained intact. It was second nature now, an expression she wore not just to the customers, but as a reminder to herself that she could handle whatever the day threw at her. By the time the breakfast rush began to ease, Emily's legs ached from constant movement, but she felt a quiet satisfaction. She had kept the chaos under control, navigating the unspoken dance between kitchen and dining room without missing a step. As she cleared the last few tables, Emily thought briefly about how little most people knew of the person behind the apron. To them, she was just another waitress, efficient and polite, existing only to take orders and clear dishes. Few would guess that she was a co-owner's daughter, carrying not just plates but the weight of a family legacy. Emily didn't mind the anonymity. It allowed her to focus on what truly mattered, keeping the diner running smoothly and upholding the values her father had instilled in her. Still, she couldn't shake the thought that sooner or later, the balance she had worked so hard to maintain would be tested in a way she hadn't yet faced. The lunch crowd would soon arrive, and with it, a new wave of demands and expectations. Emily straightened her apron, took a deep breath, and prepared to dive back in. She had no way of knowing that before the day was over, a single encounter would push her patience, her professionalism, and her sense of identity to the limit. The lull between the breakfast and lunch rush never lasted long, and Emily used a brief pause to reset the tables, wipe down menus, and catch her breath. The scent of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the comforting aroma of grilled sandwiches wafting from the kitchen. She glanced at the clock, mentally preparing for the next wave of patrons. The bell above the door jingled softly, announcing the arrival of a man she hadn't seen before. He stepped into the diner with the kind of confidence that came from being accustomed to attention. His suit was impeccably tailored, his shoes polished to a mirror-like shine, and his gaze carried an unspoken expectation that others would make way for him. Emily instinctively straightened her posture, her professional smile slipping into place as she approached. "Good afternoon, sir." "Table for one," she asked with practiced warmth. The man gave a curt nod, glancing around the diner as though evaluating the worth of every detail. The checkered floors, the sunlit booths, even the placement of the condiment caddies. "Yes, by the window," he replied, his tone polite but clipped, already suggesting that he was accustomed to being obeyed. Emily led him to a freshly cleaned booth near the large front window, setting a menu before him. "Can I get you something to drink while you look over the menu? Coffee, tea, maybe iced water?" He adjusted his cufflinks before responding, his voice slow and deliberate. "Water. Cold. No ice, no lemon." As she walked away to fetch his drink, Emily felt a faint unease settle over her. There was nothing overtly rude about his behavior, but there was a sharpness to his presence, a subtle air of superiority that made the air around him feel heavier. Years of experience had taught her to recognize the early signs of a difficult customer, and this man fit the pattern. When she returned with his water, he was already scrutinizing the menu, brows knitted in disapproval. "Your menu, it's rather limited, isn't it?" he remarked without looking up. Emily kept her tone even. "We specialize in hearty, home-cooked meals, sir. Our chef specials are on the back page if you like something seasonal." He murmured, flipping the menu over as though searching for faults. "I'll have the turkey club. And make sure the bread is lightly toasted, not burnt. I can't stand when it's overdone. Oh, and the fries extra crispy, not greasy." She jotted down his order, offering a polite nod. "Of course. I'll get that started for you right away." As she walked back toward the kitchen, Emily couldn't help but notice the way his gaze followed her, not in admiration, but as though assessing her performance. She placed the order for the turkey club and fries, making a mental note to double-check the toast and fries before bringing them out. Minutes later, she delivered his meal, arranging the plate neatly before him. "Here you go, sir. Turkey club, lightly toasted, and fries extra crispy. Can I get you anything else?" He picked up one of the fries, examining it critically before taking a bite. "They're acceptable," he said finally, his tone laced with faint disappointment. Though perhaps next time, a bit more attention to even crispness would be appreciated. Emily forced a small smile. "I'll make a note of that for next time." Throughout his meal, Mr. Hargrove. She had caught his name when he paid with a sleek black card, found subtle ways to critique his experience. The bread could have been fresher. The lighting was a touch harsh. The service, while efficient, lacked what he called attentive anticipation. None of his comments were openly hostile, but each one carried the implication that he was entitled to something better. Emily moved through the interactions with practiced grace, her internal patience wearing thin even as her exterior remained calm. She could feel the tension coiling tighter with each passing moment, an unspoken warning that this encounter had not yet reached its peak. By the time he finished his meal, the diner had begun filling with the early lunch crowd, the noise rising around them. Mr. Hargrove set his utensils down deliberately, dabbing his mouth with a linen napkin. "Bring me the check, please. And do make sure it's correct. I dislike errors." Emily nodded, retrieving his bill and placing it carefully on the table. As he examined it, his expression shifted into a faint frown. "I'll pay, of course, but you might want to review how you tally sales tax. It seems imprecise." "Of course, sir. I'll make a note for the register," Emily replied, her voice steady even as her patience frayed. He settled the bill and rose to leave, offering her a parting nod that carried no warmth. As the door closed behind him, Emily exhaled slowly, releasing tension she hadn't realized she was holding. Something told her this wouldn't be the last she saw of Mr. Hargrove, and the next time, the encounter wouldn't end so quietly. Emily had barely finished clearing the last of Mr. Hargrove's table when the door swung open again, and he walked back into the diner. The timing couldn't have been worse. The lunch rush had just begun, with nearly every booth occupied and a line forming by the door. He strode past the waiting customers without so much as an acknowledgement, his sharp gaze sweeping the room until it landed on Emily. "You," he called out, his voice cutting through the ambient chatter like a blade. "We need to talk about the meal I was served earlier." A few heads turned at the raised tone, and Emily felt the first prickle of heat rise to her cheeks. She set down the tray she'd been carrying and approached with a calm, professional smile. "Of course, sir. Was there a problem?" Mr. Hargrove crossed his arms, his expression a practiced mask of displeasure. "Problem? That's putting it lightly." The bread was unevenly toasted. The fries were inconsistent, and I had to ask twice for my water to be refilled. I come to establishments like this expecting a certain standard. Emily kept her tone even, though each word felt like a needle. "I'm sorry to hear that, sir. I'll make sure your feedback is addressed." But he wasn't finished. "Frankly, I don't understand how you stay in business if this is what passes for service. Perhaps your kitchen staff is as careless as your front-of-house team. Do you even train your employees?" Nearby patrons began exchanging glances, the volume of their conversations dropping as Mr. Hargrove's voice grew sharper. Emily could feel the weight of their eyes on her, the creeping humiliation that came with being dressed down in public. She took a steadying breath, reminding herself of her father's words. "Stay calm, no matter what." "I assure you, sir, we take training seriously," she replied, clasping her hands in front of her. "I'll be happy to have your concerns reviewed." Mr. Hargrove leaned closer, his voice dropping just enough to sound more cutting. "Reviewed? That's not good enough. People like me expect excellence, not excuses. Perhaps you're just not capable of understanding that." The words landed heavier than she expected, twisting like a knife. Emily forced herself not to flinch, her smile fixed in place. She could feel a growing knot in her stomach, a mix of anger and the urge to defend herself. Yet she knew that any retaliation would only escalate the scene further. At the surrounding tables, patrons whispered to one another, their discomfort playing on their faces. A mother at the counter shot Emily a sympathetic look, while a group of teenagers in the corner stifled nervous laughter. The entire diner seemed to be holding its breath, waiting to see how far Mr. Hargrove would push. "Sir," Emily said finally, her voice steady despite the tremor she felt inside. "If there's anything we can do to make this right, I'd be happy to assist." Mr. Hargrove snorted dismissively. "Make this right? Do you think a simple apology fixes incompetence? I don't pay for mediocrity." The sting of his words was sharper now, his voice carrying enough for half the diner to hear. Emily felt the familiar urge to retreat, to escape the spotlight as ridicule, but she held her ground. Years of managing difficult customers had taught her that backing down only invited further abuse. He threw one final barb, his voice dripping with condescension. "Honestly, perhaps this job is the best you can do. Some people just aren't cut out for anything better." The remark hit harder than the others, leaving Emily momentarily speechless. She swallowed hard, forcing her professional mask to remain intact even as her composure wavered. From the corner of her eye, she saw her father glance out from a kitchen window, his brow furrowing in concern. He couldn't hear the exchange of a clatter of dishes and sizzling pans, but the sight of his daughter standing frozen under the customer's verbal assault made his jaw tighten. Emily offered a single, measured response. "I'm sorry you feel that way, sir. I'll make sure your feedback is recorded." With that, she turned to step away, though the echo of his words lingered, each one leaving a deeper mark. She busied herself with clearing a nearby table, her movements mechanical, her thoughts a swirling storm of frustration and hurt. The room's tension didn't dissipate. Conversations remained hushed and all around her. Emily could feel the patron's silent judgment, not of her, but the man who had made a spectacle of belittling her. Yet the sting of public humiliation clung to her like a second skin. In the pit of her stomach, a quiet dread settled. Something told her this wasn't over. Mr. Hargrove wasn't finished yet, and the worst of the storm still loomed on the horizon. The diner had grown quieter with each passing minute. The usual clinking of utensils and hum of conversation, giving way to an oppressive hush. All eyes were on Emily and Mr. Hargrove, the air thick with secondhand embarrassment. Even the smell of fresh coffee and sizzling bacon seemed to have lost their comforting warmth, replaced by the biting tension of the unfolding scene. Mr. Hargrove stood in the center of the diner, like a man commanding a stage, his voice raised enough to carry to the farthest corners. "This is utterly unacceptable," he barked, gesturing with a sharp, dismissive wave of his hand. "I came here expecting basic competence, but apparently that's too much to ask." Emily stood rooted near his table, her order pad clutched against her apron like a shield. She felt the weight of dozens of eyes on her, each one bearing witness to her humiliation. Her cheeks burned, but her expression remained neutral. Years of customer service had taught her to wear composure like armor. "Sir, I've apologized for the earlier issues," she said evenly, her voice steady despite the knot tightening in her chest. "If there's anything further I can do to resolve this." "Resolve this?" Mr. Hargrove cut in, his voice dripping with disdain. "You couldn't resolve a simple order if your job depended on it, which, frankly, I'm beginning to think it shouldn't. I have half a mind to speak to your manager about this farce you call service." A ripple of discomfort passed through the room. Families paused mid-bite, and a pair of businessmen at the counter exchanged uneasy glances. A young mother with her toddler shot Emily an encouraging look, silently urging her to stay strong. Emily swallowed hard, her fingers tightening around the notepad. "I understand you're upset, sir, but—" "No, I don't think you do," he snapped, his tone rising another octave. "You have one job, to take orders and deliver food. And yet, here we are, in the middle of a comedy of errors. I wouldn't trust you to run a lemonade stand, let alone a diner." The words stung, each one landing with surgical precision. Emily forced herself to breathe evenly, her mind replaying her father's words like a mantra. "Stay calm, no matter what. Never give them the satisfaction of seeing you break." Behind the counter, Carla, the other waitress on duty, froze mid-pour, her wide eyes darting between Emily and Mr. Hargrove. She took a hesitant step forward, as if to intervene, but Emily gave a subtle shake of her head. "Sir," Emily began again, fighting to keep her voice steady, "I'll be happy to bring out a fresh meal if you like, on the house." "A fresh meal won't change the fact that this establishment is a disgrace," Mr. Hargrove thundered, his voice carrying over the heads of the stunned patrons. "Do you people even care about your customers? Or do you all share a careless attitude?" Gasps and murmurs rippled through the diner. Some customers looked away, uncomfortable, while others openly glared at Mr. Hargrove, their sympathy for Emily growing by the second. Emily's hands trembled imperceptibly at her sides, her professional mask beginning to crack. She felt as though every insult was stripping away another layer of her dignity, leaving her exposed and raw before the crowd. For a brief moment, silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. Then Mr. Hargrove leaned forward, his voice dropping to a venomous hiss meant for her alone. "People like you should be grateful to even have a job like this. Know your place." The words hit harder than any shouted insult, leaving Emily momentarily stunned. Her throat tightened, and for a split second, she feared her composure would shatter. From the kitchen pass-through, her father, Mr. Carter, caught sight of her expression. Though he couldn't hear the exact words, the sight of his daughter shrinking under the customer's verbal assault sent a surge of protective anger coursing through him. He wiped his hands on a towel, ready to step out, but Emily met his gaze with a subtle shake of her head, a silent plea for him to stay back. The tension in the diner reached its zenith. Conversations had ceased entirely. The only sound was the hum of the overhead lights and the faint clatter of dishes from the kitchen. Every patron seemed frozen, waiting to see what would happen next. Emily drew in a slow breath, summoning the last reserves of her strength. "I'm sorry you feel that way, sir," she said quietly but firmly. "If there's nothing more I can do for you, I'll need to attend to my other customers." Mr. Hargrove sneered, clearly unsatisfied, but her calm, measured response left him with no further ammunition. He scoffed loudly, turning on his heel and striding toward the door, muttering under his breath about never returning to such a pathetic establishment. As the door slammed shut behind him, the spell broke. Conversation slowly resumed, though the air remained heavy with the aftertaste of confrontation. A few patrons offered Emily sympathetic smiles, while others whispered disapprovingly about Mr. Hargrove's behavior. Emily busied herself with clearing his table, her hand steady even as her heart pounded. Inside, a storm of emotions raged: anger, humiliation, and an ache of something deeper, the lingering sting of being diminished in front of strangers. She forced herself to breathe deeply, steadying her thoughts. She had survived the storm, but the echoes of Mr. Hargrove's words still clung to her like a shadow. In the corner of her mind, a single thought burned bright. This isn't over. Something is about to change. Mr. Carter pushed through the swinging kitchen doors, a towel still clutched in his callous hands, and stepped into the dining area. At first, he expected the usual controlled chaos of a mid-morning rush, the chatter of patrons mingling with the rhythmic clatter of dishes. Instead, an unfamiliar tension gripped the room. Conversations had stilled, and all eyes were fixed on the center of the diner, where Emily stood, her shoulders stiff, her gaze locked on the recently vacated table. For a heartbeat, confusion flashed across his features, and then he caught the subtle tremor in his daughter's hands as she cleared plates. The flicker of hurt in her eyes, so carefully masked for the sake of professionalism, was unmistakable to a father who had raised her. His expression hardened, his usual warm demeanor cooling into something steely and unyielding. "Emily," he said quietly, his voice carrying to the diner like a low rumble. She glanced up, startled, instinctively straightening under the weight of his gaze. "I'm fine, Dad," she managed, though the quiver in her voice betrayed her. Mr. Carter's sharp eyes swept the room, piecing together what had transpired from the tense silence and the sympathetic stares of the other patrons. Conversations that had ceased moments earlier did not resume. Instead, a wave of expectant quiet hung in the air, as if everyone present sensed a turning point was unfolding before them. "What happened?" he asked, the calmness in his tone at odds with the icy authority radiating from him. Carla, the other waitress, hesitated near the counter, her lips pressing into a thin line before she answered. "It was a customer, sir," she said softly. He wasn't exactly polite." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. A man at the corner booth, still gripping his coffee mug, spoke up, more like downright abusive. "Your daughter handled it better than most would have." Mr. Carter nodded once, absorbing the words, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. He turned back to Emily, his voice gentler now. "Is that true?" Emily hesitated, then gave a small nod. "Yeah, it's fine, really. He's gone now." But Mr. Carter didn't miss the way she avoided his eyes, or how her fingers clenched tightly around the rag she was using to wipe the table. He had seen that look before, the one she wore when she was holding herself together by sheer willpower. The tension in the room was palpable, every patron watching, waiting. Mr. Carter straightened his posture, his voice rising just enough to carry across the diner. "Nobody talks to my staff like that," he said firmly, his gaze sweeping the room. "And nobody humiliates my daughter in her own home." A collective hush fell over the diner, his words resonating in the charged atmosphere. Emily blinked back the sudden sting of tears, a mixture of relief and lingering embarrassment washing over her. Carla stepped closer, placing a comforting hand on Emily's shoulder. "We all saw it," she said quietly, addressing Mr. Carter. "It wasn't her fault." He came in here looking for a fight. Mr. Carter's eyes softened briefly as he glanced at his daughter, then hardened again as he turned back to the staff and patrons. This diner has stood for 30 years because we treat people with respect, and we expect the same in return. If someone can't understand that, they're not welcome here. A murmur of agreement rippled through the room, several patrons nodding in quiet support. Emily swallowed the lump in her throat, her voice low. "Thanks, Dad." Mr. Carter gave a curt nod, his protective fury simmering just beneath the surface. "We'll talk about this later," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. The air in the diner shifted subtly, the oppressive tension giving way to a current of solidarity. Patrons returned to their meals, conversations gradually resuming, though many cast lingering glances at Emily, now tinged with sympathy and respect. Emily took a steadying breath, her father's presence grounding her. The humiliation she had endured a moment ago still clung to her, but a spark of relief flickered in her chest. As Mr. Carter turned to return to the kitchen, a quiet murmur followed him, the collective acknowledgement of a man who commanded not just authority, but loyalty. The diner, once suffused with an uncomfortable silence, now pulsed with the unspoken reassurance that its heartbeat remained strong and unbroken. In that moment, Emily realized that the balance of the room had shifted. Her father's entrance had not erased the sting of Mr. Hargrove's words, but had reclaimed something far more important: her dignity. Mr. Carter didn't return to the kitchen as expected. Instead, he stood firmly in the center of the dining area, surveying the room with a quiet intensity that drew every eye toward him. Conversations faltered once again. The residual buzz of the diner faded until all that remained was the low hum of the ceiling fans. Emily, still standing near the counter with her rag in hand, felt her heart beat unevenly. She knew that look on her father's face, the one that meant he had made up his mind. A soft chime rang as the front door opened. Mr. Hargrove, who had stormed outside moments ago, reappeared, perhaps intending to deliver one final barb. He stopped short when he realized all eyes were on Mr. Carter, and for the first time since entering the diner, the smug confidence slipped from his face. Mr. Carter's gaze locked on him, cold and unwavering. "Mr. Hargrove, is it?" he said evenly, his voice carrying easily through the room. Hargrove hesitated, thrown off balance by the quiet authority in that tone. "Yes, You spent the last 20 minutes berating one of my staff," Mr. Carter continued, cutting to the man's protest with surgical precision, questioning her competence, mocking her in front of our patrons. "Do you know who she is?" A puzzled frown creased Hargrove's brow. "A waitress, isn't she?" The room seemed to hold its breath as Mr. Carter let the silence stretch for a beat before speaking. "She's my daughter, Emily Carter, and she is not just a waitress here. She co-owns this diner with me." The words landed like a thunderclap. A stunned silence swept through the room, punctuated only by the clatter of a fork slipping from someone's grasp. Hargrove's face blanched as the weight of the revelation hit him. His eyes flickered from Emily, whose chin had lifted with quiet dignity, back to Mr. Carter, whose stance radiated unshakable authority. I didn't know," Hargrove stammered, his bravado crumbling. "I wasn't aware." "That's the problem, isn't it?" Mr. Carter replied, his tone still calm, though there was an edge beneath the words. "You walked in here and decided that because she was serving you, she was beneath you. You didn't care to know who she was or what this place stands for." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Patrons shifted uncomfortably, some nodding in agreement. The tension that had once centered on Emily now turned toward Hargrove, the weight of collective judgment pressing down on him. Emily stood a little straighter, her grip on the rag loosening. For the first time since the confrontation began, she felt the tide turning. Hargrove opened his mouth as if to defend himself, but no words came. The sharp wit and cutting remarks he had wielded so effortlessly before had deserted him. leaving only the hollow echo of his own entitlement. Mr. Carter took a step closer, not aggressive but commanding enough to make Hargrove instinctively retreat half a step. "This diner has been part of this community for decades," he said. "Everyone who walks through those doors is treated with respect, and we expect the same in return. My daughter runs a front because she cares about the people here, not because she has to. You do well to remember that." Another murmur of approval rippled through the diner. Someone near the back gave a quiet, affirming clap that quickly spread into a small chorus of supportive nods, and whispered, "That's right." Hargrove's eyes darted around the room, searching for an ally and finding none. The smirk he had worn earlier was gone, replaced by the strained, tight-lipped expression of a man suddenly aware of his own isolation. "I apologize," he muttered finally, his voice barely audible. Mr. Carter inclined his head slightly. "You owe that to her, not to me." Hargrove turned stiffly toward Emily. "Miss Carter, I apologize for my behavior. It was uncalled for." Emily met his gaze evenly, her voice steady. "Apology accepted," she said, though there was no warmth in her tone. It wasn't forgiveness he sought, just a way to escape the crushing weight of the room's judgment. Mr. Carter let the silence hang for a moment longer before stepping back. "Enjoy the rest of your day, Mr. Hargrove. Or don't. That's up to you." The man hesitated, then turned and left without another word. The chime of the door closing behind him felt like a release. Slowly, the murmur of conversation returned, but the air remained charged. Patrons exchanged glances, some openly admiring Emily's composure, others shaking their heads at Hargrove's behavior. Carla moved to Emily's side, giving her a quick squeeze on the shoulder. Emily exhaled deeply, a shaky but genuine smile tugging at her lips. For the first time since the ordeal began, she felt seen, not as a target of ridicule, but as a co-owner of the diner, standing tall in her own right. Mr. Carter returned to her side, his expression softening. "You handled that well," he said quietly. "Did I?" she asked, her voice betraying a hint of doubt. He gave her a small, proud nod. "Better than I would have." And with that, the tension in the diner finally began to lift, leaving behind a lingering sense of solidarity. The truth had been revealed, and with it, the balance of respect restored. The air in the diner remained heavy long after Mr. Hargrove's apology. Even as he stood there, awkward and stiff, the power dynamic had shifted entirely. A moment ago, he had commanded the room with his loud complaints and entitled tone. Now, the silence pressed against him like a physical weight. His once confident posture had deflated, his shoulders hunched under the judgment of the watching crowd. "Miss Carter, I apologize," he repeated, his voice faltering as he glanced around at the many eyes fixed on him. "I shouldn't have spoken to you that way." Emily nodded slowly, her face calm, though a flicker of unease lingered in her chest. "I appreciate your apology," she said evenly, "but respect shouldn't have to be earned through confrontation." Hargrove opened his mouth as if to respond but found no words. Instead, he turned back toward Mr. Carter, his expression pleading, but the older man met his gaze with quiet finality. "This diner treats everyone with the same courtesy," Mr. Carter said, his voice steady, carrying the kind of authority that needed no volume to be heard. "We expect the same in return. I hope you'll remember that before raising your voice at another person." A murmur of approval rippled through the patrons. A couple at the corner booth offered Emily a supportive smile, and someone near the counter added softly, "Well said, Mr. Carter." The weight of collective disapproval settled firmly on Hargrove's shoulders. He shifted awkwardly, then offered a stiff nod before retreating toward the door. The bell above it chimed as he left, the sound punctuating the end of his dominance in the room. As the door swung shut, the tension began to ease. Conversations picked up in cautious bursts, and the clatter of dishes resumed. The diner, though quieter than before, began to feel like itself again. Emily released a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. The sting of the encounter still lingered, but beneath it was a sense of vindication, a quiet affirmation that she hadn't been alone. Carla appeared at her side, slipping an arm around her shoulders. "You okay?" Emily managed a small, weary smile. "I think so." "You handled that better than I would have," Carla said, shaking her head. I would have poured his coffee in his lap. The joke earned a ripple of laughter from a nearby table, a welcome break in the tension. Even Emily allowed herself a quiet chuckle. Mr. Carter approached, his usual stern expression softened with pride. "You stood your ground, Emily. That's what matters." "It didn't feel like it," she admitted, her voice quieter now. "I felt humiliated." "You weren't," he assured her. "You were tested and you didn't falter. People saw that." Indeed, patrons began offering small words of support as they paid their bills. A man who had witnessed the entire incident paused by Emily's station, saying, "You've got more composure than most of us could muster. Don't let one man's arrogance shake that." Each word of kindness chipped away at the tension that had wrapped itself around her chest. Though her composure hadn't fully returned, Emily felt a glimmer of something steadier, resilience. By the time the last of the morning rush had thinned out, the lingering discomfort had shifted to something else entirely, a quiet solidarity. Patrons who had sat frozen in their seats minutes ago were now engaging in hushed conversations, their eyes reflecting a newfound respect for both Emily and her father. Mr. Carter placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Take 5, he said softly. "You've earned it." Emily nodded and stepped out from behind the counter. Seeking a moment of stillness, she slipped into a quiet corner of the diner, watching as her father resumed his usual rhythm in the kitchen, his steady presence anchoring the space. The echoes of Hargrove's insult still stung, but louder now were the voices of support. The affirmations that respect was not something to be demanded with force, but earned through integrity. For Emily, the ordeal was far from forgotten, but something inside her had shifted. The humiliation had left its mark, yes, but so had the strength she'd found in standing her ground. And as the days stretched on, she realized the patrons weren't just looking at her as a waitress anymore. They were seeing her as a person who deserved the dignity she had always carried. The sun had already dipped below the horizon when the last of the day's customers left, leaving the diner in an unusual calm. The tables were wiped clean, the scent of fresh coffee lingered faintly in the air, and the neon sign outside cast a soft glow through the windows. Emily leaned against the counter, exhaustion finally catching up to her. The whirlwind of the morning felt like it had happened in another lifetime, yet the echoes of Mr. Hargrove's raised voice still played faintly in her mind. Her father emerged from the kitchen, apron loosened around his waist, and set 2 steaming mugs of tea on the counter. "You look like you've run a marathon," he said with a half-smile, sliding one toward her. "I feel like I did," Emily replied, wrapping her hands around the warm cup. She took a long sip, the chamomile settling some of the tension coiled in her chest. Mr. Carter studied her face for a moment, his eyes softening. "You held yourself together today. I know it didn't feel like it, but you did." Emily lowered her gaze, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup. "I wanted to disappear, Dad." Everyone was staring, and every word he said it cut deeper. "I know." He rested his hand on hers, steady and grounding. "But you didn't give him the reaction he wanted. You didn't let him take your dignity. That takes strength." She allowed herself a small smile, though the weight of the day still lingered. It didn't feel like strength at the time. "Sometimes strength doesn't," he replied. "Sometimes it just feels like surviving." The words sank in quiet but comforting. Emily leaned into the stillness, the storm of the morning gradually losing its grip. A gentle chime signaled the door opening, and to her surprise, a familiar face stepped inside. Mrs. Jenkins, one of their regular patrons, approached with a warm smile. "I just wanted to say, Emily, you handled yourself with grace today. I was here this morning, and I don't think I've ever been prouder to support this place." Emily blinked, caught off guard. "Thank you, that means a lot." "You reminded everyone what respect looks like," Mrs. Jenkins added, squeezing her hand before leaving. As the evening wore on, more customers came by to offer quiet words of encouragement. A couple who had witnessed the scene earlier in the day left a generous tip and a note that simply read, "Stay strong. We see you." Each small gesture chipped away at the heaviness Emily had been carrying, replacing it with something lighter, steadier. When the diner finally closed for the night, Emily and her father sat in their favorite booth, the one near the window where the neon light painted their faces in soft hues. "You know," Mr. Carter began, leaning back against a worn leather seat, "this place has seen its fair share of long days. But today, I realize something. You've grown into exactly the kind of person I always hoped you'd be. Strong, kind, and unwilling to let anyone shake that." Emily felt her throat tighten, her heart swelling with an unfamiliar pride. "I learned from the best," she said softly, glancing at him. A comfortable silence settled between them, the hum of the neon sign filling the space. Outside, the world moved on, unaware of the small but significant battle that had been fought and won within the diner's walls. Emily looked around the familiar space, the checkered floors, the worn counter stools, the framed photos of her family, and felt a renewed sense of belonging. The morning's humiliation had left its scars, but had also strengthened something within her, a resilience that no outburst or insult could ever erase. For the first time all day, Emily allowed herself to breathe deeply, the tension melting away. She was still standing, and that was enough. Morning sunlight streamed to the diner's wide front windows, painting the checkered floor with warm, golden patterns. Emily moved with an ease she hadn't felt in days, her steps lighter, her smile more genuine. The memory of that morning with Mr. Hargrove still lingered, but it no longer weighed her down. Instead, it had transformed into a quiet source of strength. Word of the incident had spread naturally, whispered from customer to customer, until it became something of a local legend. Regulars spoke about it with a sense of pride, and even newcomers entered the diner with an air of quiet respect, as if aware of the invisible line of dignity that now defined the space. Morning, M called Mrs. Jenkins as she slid into her favorite booth. "How's my favorite waitress today?" "Better than ever," Emily replied with an easy grin, setting down a steaming cup of coffee. "I think the air feels lighter in here, don't you?" Mrs. Jenkins chuckled knowingly. "That's because everyone's learned their manners." Behind the counter, Mr. Carter worked the register, glancing up occasionally to watch his daughter. Pride flickered in his eyes as he watched her engage with customers, her confidence unmistakable. He had always known Emily had the heart and resilience to handle the pressures of the diner, but seeing her come out of the ordeal stronger made him realize just how much she had grown. The days slipped into a comfortable rhythm. Customers who had witnessed a confrontation often left generous tips or words of encouragement scribbled on napkins. "Respect goes both ways," or "Thank you for standing tall." Emily tucked these notes away in a small box under the counter, reminders of why she loved the work she did. Mr. Hargrove never returned. His absence was barely noted, save for the occasional question from curious patrons. When asked, Emily would simply shrug and say, "Some people don't like what this diner stands for." It was all the explanation anyone needed. One afternoon, as Emily was refilling a table's coffee cups, a young woman approached her hesitantly. "Are you Emily Carter?" she asked. "Yes, that's me." The woman smiled nervously. "I just wanted to say, I was here that morning. I was on my break and didn't say anything then, but I wanted you to know you inspired me. Watching you stay calm, it reminded me I don't have to let people walk over me." Emily felt a lump form in her throat. "Thank you," she said softly. "That means more than you know." Later that evening, Emily and her father closed the diner together. The last customers had left, and the neon sign outside buzzed faintly against the quiet hum of the refrigerator. As they wiped down the counters, Mr. Carter broke the silence. "You know, Em," he said, "what happened that day wasn't just about him. It was about everyone who was watching. People don't forget moments like that. They change how we treat each other." Emily paused, the rag in her hand stilling. "I guess so. It's strange, though. Something that felt so awful at the time ended up making us stronger." Her father gave her a proud smile. "Respect isn't just given. Sometimes it's earned in the hardest way possible." She nodded, the words settling deep within her. When they finally turned off the lights and stepped out into the cool night air, Emily glanced back at the diner. The little building stood quietly, its windows reflecting the glow of the streetlights, a humble but powerful reminder of the lesson learned inside. From that day forward, the diner wasn't just a place to eat. It was a space defined by dignity, mutual respect, and the unspoken understanding that kindness mattered. Emily walked to her car with her father, her step steady, her head held high. The storm had passed, leaving in its wake not bitterness, but growth. Emily had faced disrespect and come out stronger, and the diner, her family's legacy, now thrived on a foundation of respect that would endure for years to come.